son. On the street outside Jack Bing's apartment, Chandler pulled the young man close, clapping him on the back. "So good to see you," he said, stifling a yawn as he looked at Jack, noticing the lack of sleep and hyperactivity. Clearly his part in the play was going well. The boy had never done anything by halves. If he was going to be Harry Potter's son's friend on Broadway, then he will have thrown himself into it all. How like Monica he was, in that respect. Chandler had often wondered how much bringing up a child had to do with nurture, because he sure didn't get it from her genetically. "How was the trip, Dad?" asked Jack, taking his father's luggage. "You're staying with me, right? No stopping at a hotel, like you said?" "No stopping at a hotel," said Chandler, smiling, closing his door as a yellow cab blasted its horn in his direction. "All right," he conceded, pointing at the door with his finger, indicating it was closed now and not open in the cab's path. "So, how about we grab a bite to eat, and then we get some sleep before Grandpa and Grandma's? Or, do you need a rest first?" he asked, empathetically. "It's been a long trip, hasn't it?" "Yeah," agreed Chandler, 26 hours is a long trip. And the traffic in Philadelphia was unbelievable. We'd appreciate a rest." There was a pause. A breeze dashed between them, tickling autumn leaves into the air. Chandler glanced at his Ford. "I've brought someone with me, God, she needed a break. I hope you don't mind. What with Joey off to London, I thought we could share." Jack stared past his dad, then, bending his knees, looked through the car's windows at Joanna Lucas. "A woman?" asked Jack, his voice steady. "You are going to Grandpa's and Grandma's for Christmas with us, aren't you?" "Just try and stop me," Chandler replied, trying to hide his insincerity. "It'll be great to relax with everyone, and—" He broke off and yawned. "A bit of shut-eye for a few hours, and yeah, I'll come down to the village with you." "And her?" Her head got out of the car. She was immediately beeped by a cab which she had almost opened the door onto, and waked hurriedly round the back of the car. "Jack, is it?" Joanna held out her hand towards the astonished face of Chandler's son, who proceeded to look even more amazed when she had spoken to him. "You're English?" Jack asked, then gave a wide-eyed gulp to his father, hissing, "The English? You brought the English? I thought she was going to London, not coming with you here?" "Well," began Chandler. "I'm Joanna, pleased to meet you." She held out her hand as Chandler lapsed into silence. "Your father tells me you're an actor, and that you're in Harry Potter. You must be an extremely good actor." "I am indeed," replied Jack, before clarifying, "I'm in the play. I may be a good actor, that's for the critics to establish." "So," he said, handing Chandler his bag back, and taking up Joe's, possibly in the expectation that it was lighter. It wasn't. "So, you work for my dad?" said Jack, as Chandler blipped the car to lock it before leading the well-trodden path between the bistro and the barber's which took them to the door for the apartment block's front door. "I work with your dad, I'm an engineer," Joe replied. "I work for the shale gas and oil company that Continental are buying. I'm here on work experience." "Work experience?" "To be project manager," she replied. "I'm side deputy at the moment." "That sounds good," Jack replied vaguely, ignoring his father's head shaking at his obvious real lack of interest but keeping the conversation going out of politeness. Buzzing to get in, Jack expected Joey to be in and answer for them, but, when there was no answer, he put Joe's bag on the floor before typing the apartment's key code number into the keypad, pausing longer than was strictly necessary before reaching for Joe's bag again. It wasn't there. Joe had picked it up quickly, saying a quick thank you to Jack in acknowledgement for his struggle along the footpath. "It's 3 floors up," Jack continued. "And we are going to my grandparents' house tomorrow." "What are you going to do to keep yourself busy on Christmas Day?" he asked, pointedly. "Joe is happy to stay here, as long as you are happy to have her. The accommodation she was living in became too unsafe to remain there." Joe nodded her head in agreement. "But I can easily stay somewhere else if it's too much trouble," Joe added. When it looked as if Jack was going to take the conversation towards discussing alternative arrangements, Chandler said, "Yes, Jack and I are at the jailers. Till the day after Christmas. But, I know you will want to see the sights, won't you?" Heavy-heartedly, Joanna nodded, wondering for the first time whether she was wrong to have come with Chandler from Marshall. His son seemed, well, if not hostile, uncertain about her. It had been a long drive from Marshall. 7 states and over 1,000 miles of highway had made her realize the vastness of the country. At first, she had been thrilled every time they had crossed a state border, which had amused Chandler. Then, she had drifted off to sleep, despite Spandau Ballet being played rather loudly on the CD player, waking up 100 miles later at a gas station where Chandler had filled up. She had peered through the window as she watched him fill up with very cheap fuel, compared to what she was used to anyway, and decided to get something for them both to eat, sandwiches and crisps, or chips, rather, from the gas station shop, and some bottles of mineral water, Coke and coffee. Feeling more than a little guilty as he continued to drive through the night, they kept one another amused with driving games, betting make-believe dollars on the next color of the car that would drive by them. She had perked up when a Simon and Garfunkel song came on the radio, and talked about the cassette tape she had at university which she had played until both sides could be heard at the same time, telling him she had wondered about Saginaw and the cars on the New Jersey Turnpike, wondering if that was where they would be driving through. It turned out they wouldn't, until they had headed into semi-personal questions. Chandler had told her about his family, how he and Monica had adopted the twins when she found out she couldn't have them. How they had had an idyllic marriage in the suburbs until Jack and Erica had turned 9, at which point Monica, who was about to break out with a chain of restaurants, went bankrupt just as he had accepted a job as a systems manager at Microsoft. Believing their marriage could survive being apart, Chandler had gone from New York to Los Angeles to work with the company, but the only legacy of that job had been his claim to fame. The search engine he had worked on had been named after him. "What, Chandler?" Joe had quipped. "Very funny," he'd replied. "No, Bing search engine. They thought my name was funny. Could have been worse, I could have been Chandler Google." And so, when he had returned to New York, he realized they couldn't resurrect their marriage. Too much time had passed. He had not realized the full extent the collapse of Monica's businesses had been, and, with only her less than understanding family to support her, she had sunk into a deep depression, to which Chandler's response had been to accept the Continental job in Louisiana. A far cry from being a statistical analyst in data reconfiguration, he had said, at length. "But there is nothing I would not do to have fixed this with Monica." "You can't?" Joe had asked. "Marriages have survived worse than that." "Didn't I just tell you how much of a coward I was? I refused to face up to the difficulties she was going through, not only practically, but emotionally. We have several very close friends, but even they were not around. Phoebe and Mike had moved with little Lily to Toronto, Ross, Rachel and Emma had gone to LA, she was left with her parents, who always waited for her to fail to kick her down even further, and worst of all, she didn't have me to help her. I was going through ... problems. So she filed for divorce and, like a fool, I signed it." The story sat between them for a few minutes, as Joanna heard it all again through her mind as cars raced past them. "Do you?" Joe broke off, semi-personal questions heading as they were very quickly to the personal. "Do I what? Still love her?" "Yes." "Yes." There had been silence after this, and Joe had asked no more. Marriages were difficult, and she had been glad he had not asked her about the one she had had. Instead, as they traveled towards where dawn was slowly breaking, she reflected on this big, open, wild, beautiful country, the offspring of her small, beautiful, geographically diverse country. And yet, for all its beauty, the vastness of America always took her breath away. Number 20 was soon in front of them, and Joe's brain, slipping back to the here and now, caught on to Chandler's words of, "Well, I hope you tidied, my boy," as Jack slipped the key into the lock. "And I did, Dad, yeah," he said, as Chandler held the door open for her. "Just put it anywhere," he said, as he looked around. "A coffee would be great," he added, throwing himself onto the sofa. Then, looking at Joe, who was still standing near the door, said, "Come, sit down, Joanna Lucas. The chairs are the same. Good to know some things don't." "Joanna Lucas," declared a voice coming out of the bathroom. The voice was soon followed by its owner, a man, well-toned and clearly into his looks, wrapped in a towel. He strode over to Joe and out a hand. Joe hoped he had a good grip of the towel. "How you doing?" "Well," began Joe, taken aback. Chandler, from the chair, rolled his eyes. "Joey, this is Joanna Lucas, a work colleague." "I know," he said. "Joanna Lucas. 10th of May 1977. Then, noting his friend's face, fell silent as he realized he knew a little too much than he ought of a person he had only just met. "Lucky guess," he added, a little sheepishly. "Chandler's told me so much about you. You're coming with me to London, aren't you?" "Well, actually, Joanna began, glancing at Chandler. So, this was the friend with the spare ticket to London. He seemed friendly enough, if a little odd. "Oh yeah, Joey," said Jack, placing the coffee next to his dad on the table. "You ought to go, Joanna. It beats sitting around here on your own for 2 days while Dad and I go to Grandma's." "Well," said Joe again, wondering what to say next. "I go in a couple of hours," said Joey, nodding to Chandler. "Hey, I thought we could get a coffee down at Cafe Perk. I hear Gunter's back from Thailand, and he's got himself a wife." "Not a Thai bride?" declared Chandler, slapping his thigh in amusement. "Now this I gotta see." "Joe?" he asked, looking at Joanna. "Yo," said Joey, now on his way to his room. "No, I meant Joanna," said Chandler, to his ex-roommate. "Oh," said Joey. Joe, both very similar. Joanna left her bag by the counter and, without waiting for Jack to invite her to sit down, as there was a good possibility that he wouldn't, sat on the settee next to him. "Joe, it's up to you. You can stay here and have a rest, watch some TV. Or come downtown with us to the coffee house." Joe paused. Much as she would have liked to stay with Chandler and see the sights, a rest and a close of her eyes would be much welcome. She didn't know how Chandler could do that, having spent close to 2 days awake, go out, just like that. Just then, Joey came back out of his room, now dressed in smart jeans and a polo shirt. "Ready to go?" "You betcha," said Chandler, getting up. "You coming, Joanna?" Joe shook her head. "That really took it out of me, that drive, and I wasn't even behind the wheel. I could do with a rest." "Here, have this," said Chandler, handing her his untouched coffee. "There'll be plenty of Christmas movies on cable. Here, I'll put it on for you." Seconds later, Home Alone appeared on the screen. The film had got as far as where Kevin sets up his house to trap the burglars. "Oh, man," said Jack, "now you know it's Christmas when Kevin's home alone." "I'll stay," nodded Joanna again. As Chandler and Joey said their goodbyes, promising not to be out too long, Joe closed her eyes, Kevin's antics, for once, being missed as Joanna drifted off to sleep. 88,888,888. "Thanks, Gunter," said Jack, tucking his wallet into his trouser pocket, before sitting down on the large orange sofa. "My God, if this sofa could talk," said Joey, putting his hands over its upholstery. "Yeah, it would say, 'Please recover me, I am over 20 years old. People keep putting their butt on me.' Thanks," he added, nodding to Gunter, who was bringing over their drinks. "No, I mean, all the great times we've had here," he clarified, nodding around him. "Do you remember, when we first met Rachel and she had run away from her wedding?" "Yeah," replied Chandler. "I remember not remembering who she was. Man, she really had changed." "Enough about that, what's with this Joe chick?" Joey folded one leg, resting his ankle on his knee. Chandler, coffee in hand, paused mid-sip. "Fiercely, she's not a chick. Secondly, I felt sorry for her, And, for your information, she hadn't wanted to come. Well, isn't that kinda why you asked for the ticket from Uncle Joey? Asked Jack, his pale eyes glimmering coldly. We thought she was going and now you tell us she's not? What's she gonna do tomorrow? She can't come to Grandpa and Grandma's? Chandler looked over to his son's cross face. We thought she was going with Joey. Well, who knows, said Chandler. I invited her, I have her ticket. Look, he said, putting down his cup. I feel sorry for her, I was mean to her. 'Tis the season for goodwill to all men and all. Well done, you rescued her, Dad. Is she going with Uncle Joey or not? Jack demanded. She didn't say, son, replied Chandler, picking up his coffee again. And, I would ask you to mind your attitude, she is old enough to be your mother. Come on, drink up, said Joey, suddenly, though they had only got there a quarter of an hour ago. Gotta go if we're getting to the airport, if she's coming with me then we gotta go back and get her. Mom is going to be there tomorrow, with Erica, said Jack, conversationally, as Joey held his hand out for a cab. Well, of course she is, said Chandler, as his son got in first, and he squeezed in next to him, Joey taking the front seat. And Uncle Ross, Aunt Rachel, and Emma. Bet they'll be filming for their channel. I'm so busy with my rehearsals I haven't had a chance this week. Man, I wish I was going with you, Uncle Joey, he added, though I am so glad to actually have rehearsals for something real. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Joey replied, his tone short, though educational. It took me years to get my big break after Days of Our Lives. They drove up from 4th through to 1st, the cab taking a shortcut to the Upper East Side. Ross? Rachel? Emma? Thought Chandler, as the Christmas lights twinkled outside. He could have borne it with just them, his family, but of course the Jellers were Ross's parents too and they would be in their element with all of their grandchildren together. His mind drifted to the time but he fought his mind to open the box of thoughts that had been 10 years ago and things were different now. As they got to the 3rd floor, Jack, with his hand on the knob, turned it, but didn't step into his apartment straight away. Listen, he said, as he held onto the door. She's on the phone. All was quiet in the deep, dark wood. The mouse found a nut, and the nut looked good. There was a pause, then, I love you so much, Tim, they heard her say. Then, there was nothing. Joey and Chandler looked at one another, Chandler catching his son's hand as Jack was about to open the door. He said, before jangling his keys over loudly, and putting them in the lock, before moving his hand in a gesture which told his son that now was the time to come in. Hi, said Jo, her phone to her chest. She had been woken up by the call half an hour ago. It had been her sister who had told her that the boys needed to talk to them, as it was now their bedtime, and she had spoken first to James, wishing him love and telling him that Father Christmas was sending his present in the post, only to be told by her eldest that he knew it was mums and dads who gave children presents at Christmas, but not to worry, he wouldn't tell Timothy. She had then had an excited Timothy on the telephone telling her about the Christmas railway ride they had that day, and asking whether he would see her soon. A light, as if an answer, clear as day, had then radiated in her head, and a thought had become clearer and clearer in her mind as she recited Big Ruffalo to her second-born, a story that he loved so much she knew it by heart. She would call Francesca back later and tell her sister the good news. That is, if the offer was still open. May I talk to you, Chandler? She asked, as they came in. Jack, who glared at her for a moment, walked into his room and closed the door loudly. Yeah? How've you been? As Joey made into his room as well, saying something about his bags for his trip, Joanna had smiled at him. Thank you for the kind offer to stay, said Jo, her voice low. May I ask, is the offer of the ticket still on? To go to London? Asked Chandler, feeling his stomach tighten. Yes. I feel stupid having said no, she explained. If I can do anything for my boys this Christmas it is to be with them, considering the circumstances. Oh, yeah, sure, said Chandler, his voice a little hollow. The circumstances? Being so far away from them, she explained quickly. I've had that bonus from Mr. Samuels paid already. At least that's something for my work. Something? Said Chandler, disgusted. You should have been up there, Joe, being praised for your discovery, not Nathan Daniels. I'd have been too shy, she replied. It wasn't my place, full of company people. I'm an outsider, which doesn't matter. I can give Joey the money for the airline ticket. She smiled again, but this time, Chandler frowned, folding his arms. I think he'd say no, he replied. But if you wanna offer. Then he frowned again. You're coming back though, right? Yes, of course. I've got 5 weeks to do in North Dakota. Okay then, said Chandler, feeling his heart beating a little faster. He was happy that she was going, but, on the drive over to the city, was rather getting used to the idea that she was staying. He could show her around the city, do some of the things tourists liked to do. That's it, said Joey, striding out of his room, a wheeled suitcase behind him. I'm gonna get a cab to JFK, he said, patting Chandler on the shoulder. My God, this is gonna be one hell of a trip. I mean, London? The West End? To consult on the cursed child? I can't wait till you tell me, Chandler replied. Hey, Joe, can I have a word? Joey raised his eyebrows, looked at Joanna, then back to his friend. Oh, you meant me? He asked. Okay, man, what's up? Is it okay with you that Joanna comes with you to London with your spare ticket? I mean, you've not promised it to anyone else? No, I haven't. Yeah, she can come. He brightened, smiling across to Joe. So it's settled? You're coming to London after all, baby doll? You bet I am. Joanna replied, in her best Brooklyn accent. Hey, said Joey, smiling at Chandler's friend. That's pretty good. Where did you learn that? Did you go to acting school? No, I went to university to study engineering, Joe replied, in her normal voice. I just picked these up, just a party piece, I suppose. Great, great, said Joey. Can you do any more? Maybe you can help Jack with an English accent for the play he's in. Chandler left Joey and Joe talking about accents as he went across to Jack's door. Knocking, he waited until his son answered, and told him the change in arrangements, or rather, that the original arrangements were in place. Hey, I can drive them there, said Jack, grinning at his dad. Can I take your car, Dad? Aunt Phoebe's old cab needs a clean inside. I don't think anyone would like to take a ride in that anytime soon. Scottish, guessed Joey, as Chandler and Jack crossed over to them. Wrong, said Joanna. This is Scottish, she said, in a Galloway accent, or this is Edinburgh, she added. And, do you know this? Joey thought for a moment. Irish? Welsh, said Joanna, smiling, having done her retinue of Yorkshire, Somerset, Cornwall, Liverpool, and Cockney. Where's Welsh? Asked Joey, puzzled. Wales is the country next to England, Joanna said, nodding as Chandler thumbed towards the door, indicating they were to go. A country next to England? Asked Joey, as Jack closed the door to apartment number 20. Yeah. It has its own language. A country next to England, repeated Joey, as they descended the stairs. With its own language. He stopped on the floor below, and looked at Chandler. Did you know about this? Chandler laughed, and nodded. Not about the language part, but I've heard of Wales, Joey. O's, dialogue, said Joanna, although yes, thank you is about all I know. Wow, said Joey, shaking his head as they got to the lobby. A whole other country, with a whole other language. Do you think I need to learn it before going to London? People in Wales speak English, said Joanna, laughing as Chandler took her bag, opening the boot, and swinging it in. Okay, that's a relief, said Joey, getting in the front. A whole other country next to England with its whole other language. Hey, Joanna, did I explain that Joey Tribbiani was an excellent actor and stage consultant? 88,888,888. It took them an hour and a half to get to the drop-off point at JFK Airport. Seeing as it was Christmas Eve, there was a corresponding amount of traffic, people and busyness. Jack waited in the car as Joey, Joanna and Chandler got out of the car. The airport forecourt was busy. Planes flying overhead added to the bustle, and Joey's case was almost knocked out of his hand. "Look, we can't stop long. Some bastard will ticket us if we're any longer than 10 minutes, they're like African lions waiting for the kill." "Well," said Joey, stepping towards Chandler, drawing him in and giving him a pat on the back. "I gotta say, I wish it were you who was comin'. I'm sure Joanna will be as good company," he added, smiling over his shoulder. In the darkness, Joe could feel herself pink. "Yes, thank you, Chandler," Joanna echoed, as Joey stepped back. "I am glad you kept that ticket for me." "Thank you." She was about to hug him too when the phone in her pocket began to vibrate. Putting her hand down to her jeans, she looked up at him. "Sorry," she said. "That'll be my sister. Better call her back in a minute. Tell her to set an extra place for dinner tomorrow." Joe took out her phone and switched it off, then stowed it away. "I hope you have a good time tomorrow, too," she added, quickly. "Nothing better than Christmas with your family." "Indeed," nodded Chandler, swallowing down the words he would like to have chosen to describe what he thought tomorrow would be like. "Well, take care, English," he said, taking a step back. "I hear that London's knife crime is getting worse." "Says the man from New York," Joe replied, grinning. "Hey, I'll have you know the old city's cleaned up its act. No crime here. Only the crime of missing our flight if we don't get a move on," called Joey, who had gone 20 yards towards the entrance of JFK Airport before realizing Joanna wasn't following him. "Thank you, Chandler, you're a very decent human being after all. I'm sorry I said you weren't." "Enjoy your Christmas," he said. He leaned in to kiss her on the cheek, but, just at that moment Joanna turned to pick up her bag, and he kissed the cold night air, where she had once been, instead. "Thank you," she said again, folding her hand around his left arm and squeezing a little. "You're a good friend, Chandler." "Yeah man," said Joey, who had come over, taking her bag and holding it with his suitcase. "Take it easy at the Jellers, you know?" Chandler watched for a moment as they went towards the building before jumping back into his car with Jack. His son pulled into the queue of vehicles waiting to filter into the airport's main road, and Chandler looked back at the airport building for a moment, as his friends, left for London. Then, as his son managed to find a space and pull off, Chandler began to steel his mind for Christmas Day.